is up, my football family? Welcome into the midway point of our divisional breakdowns for the 2020 NFL Draft. In this video, we're doing the NFC West, and make sure you hit that like button down below. At 1,000 likes, we will unlock the AFC West. If you want another way to support the channel, guys, if you've got Cardinals fans, Niners fans, Rams fans, Seahawks fans, share this video with your family and friends. I'd really appreciate it. And before we do start, I have one quick thing I need to address because I get dozens of comments each year from people who come into these videos, watch them, and proceed to inform me, this video's stupid, you have no idea how these guys are going to pan out, why aren't you an NFL GM if you're so smart? First off, why are you here? Why'd you watch the video in the first place? Second, no, nobody knows everything, including your team's general manager. Bill O'Brien just traded the best wide receiver in football for a bag of Doritos. The Jags took a punter the pick before Russell Wilson. The Bears passed on Watson and Mahomes for Mitch Trubisky. So let's not act like the NFL is any better at this. But that's also like going into a Super Bowl preview show and saying it's dumb to analyze the game because we have no idea what's going to happen and who's going to win. Look, every year teams screw up the draft. We look back saying, what the hell were they thinking? And more often than not, we didn't actually need hindsight to tell us that it was a bad draft in the first place. So I'm here as someone who's spent countless hours evaluating these players, studying team building philosophies, historical draft data, attending the Senior Bowl, and it's my job to tell you who I personally believe did a good or bad job with the picks that they had. And hey, by the looks of it, I wasn't so bad last year. So here we go. Starting off alphabetically with the Arizona Cardinals, who knocked their first two picks absolutely out of the park. Now, I don't know if there is a team that only had two picks in the first three rounds that did better than the Arizona Cardinals. Isaiah Simmons at 108, who was the third best player in this class. You can make a case the second best player in this class if you take positional value out of it, removing Joe Burrow from the equation potentially. Anyway, Isaiah Simmons is ridiculous. Think of Derwin James, Jamal Adams, that modern hybrid defender. He is a little bigger, he's going to play a little more linebacker here, but he's going to play some slot corners, some strong safety, some outside linebacker, some middle linebacker. He's going to be everywhere. This Cardinals team was awful against tight ends last year. He's going to help with that. He's going to cover slot wide receivers, running backs out of the backfield. Just a crazy pick to get him at 108. I think they wanted to go offensive tackle. Their next pick definitely indicated that that was on their minds. But to get Isaiah Simmons here, who is a top three player in this class easily, was a total steal. Between him and Buda Baker and Jordan Hicks, the coverage unit there is going to be very difficult for these modern offenses to operate against. You have a guy to spy Russell Wilson and contain him. You have a guy that can run with George Kittle in this division. You have a guy that can handle some of the over-the-middle passing game elements that the Rams do. He is a great fit for this division. So that is an A+. It was originally dinged a little bit because I really was wondering how this team was going to land some tackle help for this team, because I think pushing the ball downfield ultimately will be a better impact for this team than even Isaiah Simmons, because Kyler Murray and these receivers really are explosive to get downfield, but I just don't think the offensive line there in place was at a situation after the Simmons pick that they were still, not going to be able to do that. But now you land Josh Jones, who at worst is a top 50 player in this class. He is an excellent high floor offensive tackle. He has a mean streak. He lands his punches. He's incredibly strong. To me, his footwork leaves a little bit to be desired, but he can still grow from that. The nice thing too is he's going to have a lot of quick pass sets in this offense coming out of Houston that is not unlike what the two teams were running. So he's going to be very familiar with how a lot of this stuff's going to operate. He's an excellent fit. He provides you an instant upgrade at right tackle to Justin Murray. I mean, just those two picks alone make this class a total win. You can't draw it up any better for the Arizona Cardinals, who are definitely one of the hype teams. I feel like a lot of the hype teams heading into the draft won the draft, and the Cardinals are one of them. Probably one of the 5 best drafts in the entire class just off of those two picks alone. And then the other big need on this team was interior defensive line. I've talked about it to death on this channel that the Cardinals have a lot of finesse, and they had another finesse pick with Isaiah Simmons. And then they spent the rest of this draft getting more physical, which I really like. So you get Leki Fotu and Rashard Lawrence, who are completely different prospects, which I like mixing it up there. Leki Fotu is that high floor, run defending nose tackle type that we talk about. You know, the problem with drafting a Derek Brown potentially in the first round is you can get a Leki Fotu in the fourth round. There's dozens of these guys every year. There's dozens of free agents just like him. But you do at some point need to bring these guys in. So he's a great fit to just kind of help stop the run, eat some blocks, can shed in the run game. And then you grab Rashard Lawrence, who is not a good run defender on the interior. Played a lot of edge at LSU in their 3-3-5 defense. He is going to be a good fit as a defensive end in this 3-4 scheme at some point. He's not ready right away. He's unrefined. He has almost no discipline against the run. He has virtually no pass rush moves. But one thing that he does bring to the table is athleticism and get off. So you need to coach this guy up. He needs to sit and develop for a year. He's kind of a Robert Nkemdiche type of prospect, but you don't have to spend that first round pick on him. Then you grab Evan Weaver. Nkemdiche, a total first round bust for the Cardinals if you aren't familiar with who he was. Then you grab Evan Weaver. He's a bigger linebacker. He's a good player. He's going to be, depth here. He could start next to Jordan Hicks. Potentially, I have a hard time seeing that. He's kind of a high floor, low ceiling guy. He's just not an excellent athlete, but he is a good tackler and a high IQ guy. He's going to contribute on special teams as well. And then to grab Eno Benjamin in the 7th round. I'm always a fan of grabbing a running back in the 7th round because you can usually find a starting caliber player late in the draft if you draft correctly. And Eno Benjamin might not ever be a feature back. I can almost promise you he won't be, but my pro comp for him is actually Dion Lewis, who's had a very good NFL career. I think he was a 7th round pick or an undrafted free agent for the Patriots. A shifty guy, not overly explosive, not powerful, but in this short, quick-hitting passing game, he's an excellent fit. He's not going to have to play. You've got bodies there. But if anything were to happen to Chase Edmonds or Kenyon Drake, also Kenyon Drake on that one-year contract here, he could definitely be a factor in this passing game. So an excellent pick there in the 7th round. So overall, I have to give this draft an A+. Like, they did some nice things in the mid-rounds. When you are so good in the first, second round, not to mention they got DeAndre Hopkins for their 2nd round pick. Like, are you kidding me? We didn't even mention that. So this offseason could not have gone any better for the Arizona Cardinals. I was a little hesitant on the hype train because of, I had some questions about that offensive line, but getting Josh Jones in there, Isaiah Simmons making that defense much more viable too, I would be ecstatic. The only problem is they're in a really tough division. At least they're up to 7 playoff teams for next year. The Cardinals are going to be one of the funnest teams to watch in the NFL next year, and I am just ecstatic for Kyler Murray because you have got to, help out your young rookie quarterbacks, even if they're as good of a player as Kyler Murray. So great on the Cardinals, one of the best drafts out there, an A+ for this draft and the offseason as a whole. Next up, we got the San Francisco 49ers, a bit of a shorter draft. They had the 2 first-round picks and then had to wait till the middle of day 3 before we brought up their name. So they did exactly what I had been telling 49ers they were going to do all along. I will ring my bell, toot my own horn, whatever you want to call it. This was one of my better calls of the offseason. Niners fans, we want Jerry Jeudy. We want CeeDee Lamb. You cannot take a defensive tackle with the receivers in this class, blah, blah, blah. It made no sense for the Niners to draft one of those wide receivers. And look at this draft. It's exactly what I was saying. The Niners don't care who their outside wide receivers are. They really don't. This passing game operates over the middle of the field through crossing routes, slot wide receivers. They have Deebo Samuel, they have George Kittle. If they wanted another weapon, it was going to be another guy that they can use, as a mismatch problem over the field that they can scheme touches for. Jimmy Garoppolo is not an exceptional perimeter deep ball thrower. Kyle Shanahan is well aware of that. This offense schematically doesn't need a Jerry Jeudy or a CeeDee Lamb, who quite frankly aren't even as good of scheme fits as Brandon Ayuk based on the route concepts that this team runs. So Brandon Ayuk is another Deebo Samuel in here. But anyway, back to the Kinlaw pick. Niners fans wanted that high-end wide receiver. They were available. I kept saying they traded up here because they had to get rid of DeForest Buckner. They weren't going to be able to afford him. The salary cap exists unless you're the New Orleans Saints. That's a different story, but the salary cap exists here. They weren't going to be able to afford DeForest Buckner. You saw the contract the Colts gave him. They had no room for DeForest Buckner. He was not going to be on the team next year. John Lynch said it was the hardest thing he's ever had to do was trading him, but it was a reality they had to face. That left a gaping hole at interior defensive lineman, which was, outside of Kyle Shanahan's play calling, the number one asset that this team had last year, that pass rush. And DeForest Buckner, no, he might not have had the production that a guy like Nick Bosa had, was as big of a factor because he is the kind of guy that you cannot double team. You cannot single team. Javon Kinlaw, the same way. All of a sudden, if you take this impact pass rushing interior defensive lineman, and I was even saying if Derek Brown was there, they're going to go with Kinlaw because he's the better pass rusher. If you take that guy that you have to double team out of the equation, say DeForest Buckner's gone, they go with Jerry Jeudy, or they go with CeeDee Lamb at 14, and they grab, I don't know, Ross Blacklock or Marlon Davidson at the end of the first round. I'm a little more comfortable single teaming one of those two guys in the end of the first round. Kinlaw is a monster. You cannot single team him. Sorry, I'm struggling with this. So when you have to, on the interior, manage that power, you can't spread your guards out. You can't have your line shift towards Nick Bosa, shift towards Dee Ford. It totally unlocks those guys. Nick Bosa got a ton of one-on-ones last year. So that is why Javon Kinlaw is the right pick here. It restores to order what you had with DeForest Buckner that I don't think Niners fans realized how big of an asset that truly was. DJ Jones, Solomon Thomas, those guys were never going to replace that. Arik Armstead is not an interior defensive lineman, guys. He is a 4-tech, a 5-tech. He's a defensive end. He's an excellent run defender. He does a lot of different things for this defense, but demanding double teams on the inside is not one of those things. So Javon Kinlaw reopens this defense. Excellent pick. Then we hinted at Brandon Ayuk. The more I have thought about this pick, the more I like it. Now, I'm going to be very clear. I did not think Brandon Ayuk was a very good wide receiver. If he ended up with a team like, say, the Jets or even like the Broncos or a lot of these teams, even like the Colts, a lot of teams, pretty much anyone in the league that wasn't the Ravens or the Niners that operate the offense over the middle of the field. The Saints might have been another great spot for Ayuk, but in a traditional offense where receivers have to run routes and kind of create on their own and get open and be a consistent contested catch threat, I didn't love Brandon Ayuk. But one thing he can do is run extremely fast and break tackles like none other. Think of Deebo Samuel. This is an excellent, excellent fit for the 49ers. So they saw him as their guy. They say, Laviska Shenault, probably a pretty similar player, but the dude's hurt all the time. Let's get Brandon Ayuk, who's pretty much the same player, who stays healthy. So I can criticize, he was a reach on my own board. I don't know if they had to trade up for him, but my God, it's an excellent fit, and I think he's going to be a hell of a football player for the Niners. So at the end of the day, I am not going to question Kyle Shanahan for this. I think they walked away with two massive impacts for next year. It's not like they lost a bunch of guys in free agency, so the Niners are sitting pretty heading into next year. And then we do have to mention, real quick, they did acquire Trent Williams with that pick. I think that's worth noting. They were forced, their hand was kind of forced here because Joe Staley announced his retirement on day 3 of the draft. Their left tackle, a potential Hall of Fame left tackle. That was pretty crazy, but excellent trade to go get Trent Williams there in the 4th round. I just wanted to mix that in here. It's not going to play too much of a factor for their grade. They traded their 5th round pick this year and a 3rd rounder next year. But basically plugging and playing in there at left tackle, potentially an even better scheme fit. Trent Williams with that move block ability at left tackle. So a really good move there. But they grabbed Colton McKivitz to kind of sit and develop at tackle. This is another thing I've been saying about the Niners is that they've done a really good job of getting the most out of low-level investments. Look at Justin School and Daniel Brunskill really stepped in and played well last year to a lot of people's surprise. Colton McKivitz fits that mold as a guy that moves well in space, kind of gets out quickly, can really execute this move block scheme that they have here in San Francisco. And then Charlie Warner, a blocking tight end. This is what really drove me insane thinking about the Green Bay Packers, because the Green Bay Packers are trying to replicate the 49ers, right? They got Matt LaFleur, who's this Kyle Shanahan understudy, and he's like, we're going to grab a running back in the 2nd round. We're going to grab a fullback or a blocking tight end in the 3rd round because we need those pieces for our offense. Well, the difference is the Niners, they understand that, yeah, you need those players, but you don't need to spend a bunch of cap space, a bunch of high-end picks on them. We can take Charlie Warner in the 6th round if fills that need. We can sign JaMychal Hasty as an undrafted free agent instead of drafting A.J. Dillon in the 2nd round. Instead, we're going to spend a 1st-round pick on Brandon Ayuk. We're going to spend a 2nd-round pick on Deebo Samuel. We're going to trade a 3rd-round pick for Emmanuel Sanders. It just blows my mind that the Packers think that they can replicate the Niners by making the moves that they're making. It's really embarrassing. Anyway, they grabbed Charlie Warner, who's a great blocker, a great fit. They needed guys behind George Kittle, especially guys that can block. So excellent fit there. I think he will play a factor. And then they grabbed Jawan Jennings just to get in the mix here. He's probably not going to become any kind of impact because you've got Ayuk, you've got Deebo Samuel, but he's the same thing, that over the middle, big-bodied slot wide receiver, excellent run after the catch. If it could not be any more clear to the 49ers and their fans that they don't care who their perimeter wide receivers are, that this is not a traditional offense. They don't care. They don't need Jerry Jeudy running his routes out there. Shanahan's going to scheme up anyone that can run. So let it be known that this offense does not wish to throw the ball to the perimeter, like at all. So there you go. There's your Niners grade. I give it an A-. I did factor in the Trent Williams thing because I think they handled that like a pro. Like, to be forced on day 3 to understand that Joe Staley's retiring and still walk out of it with Trent Williams after you already got a receiver and an interior defensive lineman in the 1st round. Excellent draft for the 49ers. You know, compared to other drafts, it's not as good, but it still gets an A-. So really good day for the Niners. And then the Rams, some ups and some downs here. Cam Akers in the 2nd round to me was inexcusable. This team already drafted a running back in the 3rd round last year, Darrell Henderson. They've barely given him a chance. They drafted John Kelly. They've barely given him a chance. They have Malcolm Brown. They've got running backs in here. They have massive needs. They have huge cap issues. I don't get this pick. This was one of the worst picks in the draft. This is very similar to the Packers taking A.J. Dillon. It's just unnecessary. And I don't even think Cam Akers is all that good. I've compared him to Ronald Jones as a running back that has some issues, like as far as the vision and being a great route runner and being everything that you need to be a 2nd round running back. That one was a massive head scratcher. That to me was one of the worst picks in the entire draft. You could have gone linebacker, you could have gone pass rusher, you could have gone with a different wide receiver. Like literally almost any other position would have made more sense than running back here to the Rams. A terrible investment for a team that has given up a lot of resources to have the team that they've had as far as draft capital. So that one was bad. I don't see him beating out Darrell Henderson. I think Darrell Henderson was a significantly better prospect coming out of college. So we'll see how that thing all plays out. But if you want some fantasy football advice, I'm going to be staying away from Cam Akers because they've shown that they're going to play the best player. Like, they didn't play Darrell Henderson last year. They played Malcolm Brown a lot. So I don't think Cam Akers was a good pick at all. That one gets an F. I did like the Van Jefferson pick. They let Brandon Cooks go. Now, I think Van Jefferson, an eerily familiar comparison for him would be Robert Woods. He's an excellent route runner, great contested catch guy. So he's got great release off the line of scrimmage. He's not the deep threat replacement that I think they may have wanted for Brandon Cooks, but looking down the road, you've got Robert Woods getting up there in age. Cooper Kupp's on the last year of his deal, as is Josh Reynolds. You just lost Brandon Cooks. This to me is, oh crap, like we're out of cap space. We're about to lose all our wide receivers. Let's take a really good one. And they did that in Van Jefferson. He's got some injury questions, but a really good player. And then staying aggressive with the injury concerns here, taking Terrell Lewis, who simply put is an extraordinary edge rusher. You could make a case that he should have been the 2nd or 3rd best edge rusher in this class. The problem is he has gone the last 3 years and has not been able to stay healthy. Reminds me a lot of Carl Lawson coming out of Auburn. Was a special guy on tape, but had those injury concerns with his knee. So Terrell Lewis, a boom or bust pick here, but a big need. They've lost pieces on the edge there. Clay Matthews is gone, who had a lot of production last year. Terrell Lewis can get right into the mix on day 1 there. Then they take another Terrell Burgess. To me, he's kind of a high floor, low ceiling safety. He can do a little bit of everything. They don't need a starting safety, but they do need a 3rd safety to play in sub packages. Decent pick. I had about a 4th round grade on him. This is about the 4th round when they took him. I don't think he's ever going to be a star, but I think it was a good pick. Then they got Bryson Hopkins, my number 1 tight end. Again, I think this is fairly similar here to the Van Jefferson pick. They do have Tyler Higbee under contract, but they've done a good job mixing in Everett and Higbee. Bryson Hopkins is a great athlete. He isn't unlike Gerald Everett, who is a little bit more of that mismatch problem for that offense. You know, I saw him as more of like a Zach Ertz, like finesse route runner type. So I do question the scheme fit a tiny bit, but I think McVay likes what he sees. He's one of the better tight ends in this class. So a depth tight end play that can, in a year, be a pivotal piece of this offense. They do like to use both of those tight ends. So I like that pick. Great value in the 4th round. They grabbed Jordan Fuller, who's somewhat similar to Terrell Burgess, more of a free safety type, just lacks some of that athleticism. But in the 6th round, you're getting a special teamer, a guy that can play in a pinch and not get lost, a longtime starter at Ohio State, can play that free safety position in a pinch. I don't think he's ever going to be a starting caliber player. He just doesn't have that range, but a steady player that knows what he's doing. Then they grabbed Clay Johnson, linebacker out of Baylor, dart throw at linebacker. I will say, if they, instead of taking Cam Akers, grabbed like Logan Wilson or Willie Gay or one of these relevant linebackers in this class, to walk out of this class without any linebackers with their losses this offseason, I think is a pretty big L for the Rams. Then they grab a kicker. They grab Tremaine Akram, who's a really small guard but can move well, so fits this scheme. So ultimately, I had to give this one a B-. I think they got some really good players. So if you walk out of this with some good players, it can be a win. But they had a great opportunity here. I think if they could have gone with like a Logan Wilson or an impact linebacker earlier in this class, which I think is a gaping hole on this roster, it could have been a whole lot better. All right, the Seattle Seahawks are last up. This was a Seahawks draft through and through. They reached for Jordan Brooks in the 1st round. We can almost, guess going into every draft, like what 3rd round prospect are the Seahawks going to reach on? It's pretty much a dart throw. This year it was Jordan Brooks. Now, he is an excellent athlete. I think this was a better pick than the LJ Collier pick last year. It's a position of more value to me. They are at some point going to need to replace Bobby Wagner. I want to say he's 30 years old. At some point, that play is going to drop off. You could even make a strong case that last year we started to see some decline for Bobby Wagner. So there's some developmental upside there. Pete Carroll obviously likes the guy. The dude is a freak. I compare him to Zach Brown. So if they can hone him in and teach him how to cover more, he could work out. But that's the problem. He has virtually no coverage instincts at all. This team already ran a ton of base defense last year, like 70% of the time. This pick indicates to me that they want to do that again, that they might see Jordan Brooks as a replacement for Michael Kendricks. I think that could be a pretty big problem here for the Seahawks, just philosophically. Then they trade up for Darrell Taylor. Now, Darrell Taylor has some upside. He's a good athlete. Some people really like him. I saw him as just a guy, another big-bodied edge player with some explosiveness, but not a whole lot of consistency to his game. To trade up for this player, I think, was a pretty big L. You give up a 3rd round pick. You still haven't touched the offensive line. There's great options available. I know you need something at edge, but I can't really explain this one. Maybe he proves me wrong and turns into a very good player, but this reminds me a lot of LJ Collier last year. Just drafting an athlete who showed some flashes, but is just going to ultimately come in here and get lost. I'm sorry. I'm not a fan of that pick. I hope he proves me wrong, but I am going to tell you that I do not think that was a good pick. I had a 5th to a 6th round grade on Darrell Taylor. Then you draft Damian Lewis. This is the first pick I liked in this draft. He does struggle in pass protection, though. He's a mauler. We know the Seahawks would love to run the ball as much as they possibly can. Another philosophical thing, but that is what they want to do. His footwork is really sloppy in pass protection. I don't know if he's going to start day one. I dinged it a little bit because, to me, tackle here still would have been a much better pick. You guys know I love Matt Pert, Jack Driscoll, but even a Josh Jones was still there. So guard is an easier position to fill. They have better interior defense. They have better interior linemen than exterior linemen. Dwayne Brown's good, but he's getting up there in age. You could have really nailed it if you drafted one of those tackles here, but they grabbed Damian Lewis. He could be a good player. I'm not going to shred it, but I will question why it wasn't a tackle. 4th round, you grabbed Colby Parkinson. There's a lot of times watching him where he reminded me of like Jimmy Graham at slot wide receiver. The Stanford used this guy almost exclusively as a wide receiver. He's not a very good blocker. I don't think he's going to truly be viewed as a tight end here. They also had a guy in McElroy or McEnroy or whoever they had at slot wide receiver for that brief time here, who was that 6'6" tall wide receiver that they used in the slot. I think Colby Parkinson's a significantly better version of that. He can really move at his size. He's got some tenacity as a blocker, man. He will put you on your ass. If you get that 5'9" corner in the slot, he loves to take advantage of that. So they could do some fun things with outside runs, with screens. They don't do too much creative stuff here in Seattle, but there's some upside for them to do that. DJ Dallas, I thought, was a good pick in the 4th round. He's a really good athlete. At times showed like some David Johnson flashes. He's a bit of a slow starter. I actually would say he's kind of a poor man's Rashad Penny, and I did think they needed to go running back at some point in this class. I think that's a solid investment there. DJ Dallas, he's a good football player, and if Rashad Penny can't get healthy, if Chris Carson can't get healthy, he can play and make an impact for this team. You've kind of recreated the Miami backfield there between him and Travis Homer. Then they grab Alton Robinson, who to me is a better football player than Darrell Taylor with more upside. So that's why I think trading up for Darrell Taylor was just really bad. Now the Seahawks play the better player. They don't care where you're drafted. So I think there's a good chance Alton Robinson is a better player than Darrell Taylor. I'm going to say that right now. You heard it here first. My eval on Alton Robinson was one of my favorite evals I wrote of like all 400 players I did this offseason, this pre-draft process. Basically, the dude's a freak. The problem is he's 6'4", 265 pounds. He's got great get-off, but he plays with virtually no power. He thinks he's a 240-pound speed rusher. I basically said he needs to play like the 265-pound power rusher that he could be instead of the 245-pound finesse rusher that he thinks he is. So Pete Carroll, this defense has to untap that, but there's a lot of upside. This guy looks the part, and he is a great athlete, and he's a great scheme fit if he can play more physical against the run, get his hands inside, run his feet, use that power rush that is in there somewhere. You just got to unlock it. Then you got Freddie Swain out of Florida. I actually kind of like this pick low-key. I just think it's a good fit. I wasn't particularly high on him. He was in the 30s for my wide receiver rankings, but he played at a talented wide receiving corps at Florida and had really bad quarterback play. He was just kind of the odd man out here, but he made some really nice plays. I think there's something there in Freddie Swain. He moves very fluidly. His biggest problem is his route running. Like when he goes to run an in route or a corner route, he jumps and hop steps into his route and he loses all of his momentum. So they got to teach him how to run those routes without doing that. I don't know who at Florida was telling him to do that. You literally are losing all of your momentum in your cuts when you do that. But he is really fluid in his other movement skills. He doesn't have particularly bad hands. He can do some stuff after the catch. So I actually kind of like that as a slot wide receiver here. They did need a third wide receiver on this team. So keep an eye on Freddie Swain as kind of a not Tyler Lockett, a Doug Baldwin type of player here that plays a little slot, a little outside, good movement skills. Obviously, he's going to have to show the same work ethic that Doug Baldwin did, but some similarities in their games, I think. And then Steven Sullivan, tight end out of LSU, a total dart throw for a mismatch problem at tight end, looking for their George Kittle to the Niners. So he's a converted wide receiver. He's got a chance. He's a really good athlete, but is basically still learning the position. Tight end is a very large learning curve, and he started this thing very late. He switched his last year at LSU. Usually these guys who are wide receivers are converting as freshmen in high school. So maybe a guy that makes the practice squad and then over a year or two he makes his way up. We have seen this work for other guys around. Mo Alley Cox made the conversion from playing basketball in college. Darren Waller, a similar prospect coming out. So you've got to do a good job developing him, but it's worth a shot there in the 7th round. He's not going to play right away. So there is the NFC West. Some ups, some downs. Drop your comments down below, guys. Again, guys, 1,000 likes will unlock the AFC West here. Hoping to get this entire thing done today. Wrap up the draft season. So make sure you hit that like button down below so we can get on to the next division. Peace out.